Hey guys, so over the past few weeks, we've been talking about this topic of injustice. Remember that injustices are the things that happen in our world that are unfair, unequal, the things that we know are just not right. The kind of things that we feel like, somebody should do something about that, right? Like somebody needs to fix that. And we've learned over the past few weeks that God cares deeply about the injustices in our world. And he calls us to work alongside him to work on making the things that have gone wrong, make them right again. And I think that if we're honest though, the idea of doing that is pretty overwhelming. For starters, sometimes we feel like there's not a lot that we can do about the injustices in the world because they seem too big, right? Problems like racism and poverty and hunger and homophobia and human trafficking and animal cruelty and mass incarceration, those things have felt like a never ending battle against injustice. Those issues just feel huge. And at times it might feel like those problems are so big that we can't make any sort of impactful difference. And maybe you feel that way sometimes. Maybe you look at the injustices in the world and it makes you feel hopeless. They've always happened and they're still happening. So, can there even be any hope that things would be different, that those things wouldn't happen? Is there anything that we could actually do to change them? Or maybe you do have hope that things could change, but you don't feel like you are part of that solution. You might be like, are you kidding me, JT? I'm a middle schooler. Like, leave this to the adults. Like, that's their issue to fix. And maybe you see injustices, though, that are happening around you, things that happen in your neighborhood or your school, and you're like, okay, maybe I could make a difference there. But even if I wanted to, like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And so you're like, does it even make a difference? Am I even going to have any sort of meaningful impact when I see things that I know are wrong? Or maybe you're someone who knows it's happening, but honestly, most of these injustices, you don't feel like they're affecting you. And because of that, you're not really sure what you're supposed to do about it. Or maybe you just kind of don't feel like you want to do anything about it because you're like, well, maybe it's selfish of me, but I don't feel like it impacts me. So, all of that, all of those emotions, all of those perspectives, I get it. Because you're right, standing up and doing something about injustice is not easy. Sometimes we don't feel very motivated to do it. Sometimes we feel overwhelmed by how big the problems are. And we feel like, somebody older, bigger, stronger, they should do something about it. Like, don't we elect people to do something about that? Well, here's what I want you to know. When we're looking around at like who is the person that is going to make a meaningful impact, God reminds us it's us. We are the people that God has called to take action in making the things in the world that have gone wrong to make them right again. So today I want to talk to you about a guy named James. Now James is really interesting because he is the half brother of Jesus. After Jesus died and came back to life, James became a leader in the early church. And during that time, James wrote a letter to a group of Christians that were facing injustice in their world. And James wants to encourage them and he wants to challenge them. So you can find this in the book of James, chapter 2, verses 15 and 16. I want you to listen to what it says. It says, "Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it?" Now that might sound a little bit harsh. James is basically saying, hey, when you see an injustice and you just offer a few words like, oh man, yeah, that sucks. And then you just walk away and you just kind of hope something changes, but you don't actually do anything to help. What good is that? Like, what good are your words if you're not going to do anything to help? And I think that bold statement that James is making, when I hear that, that stings a little bit because if we're honest, that's what we're all tempted to do sometimes. We hear about the enormity of the problems in our world and we don't feel like we know how to solve them. And so we often settle for being like, Black Lives Matter, and they do. But then we don't do anything. Or we say, yeah, that's hard. It shouldn't be this way. but then we don't do anything. Too often, we're just saying words, but we're not taking any action. We join the hundreds, thousands, even millions of people waiting and praying that somebody else would do something. And if we're the ones hurting, sometimes we even give up hope that something can or will actually happen to make it right. But in that, we miss the opportunity that God may be giving us to be part of the answer, to be somebody that can do something. You know, James goes on to explain that as followers of Jesus, our response to injustice is directly related to our faith. He says in James chapter 2, verse 17, he says, in the same way, faith by itself is not, if not accompanied by action, is dead. I'm going to read that one more time. In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. James is saying here, our faith and our actions are connected. If we say we have faith, but it doesn't motivate us to actually do anything, then something about our faith is dead. Something about our faith is a little bit off, maybe a lot of bit off. And here's why that's a big deal. Living a life of faith is about becoming more like Jesus. And even if you've missed part of this series so far, here's the part I want you to remember. When it came to injustice, Jesus wasn't like, man, I hope somebody does something. He was always doing something. And so if we're following him, we want to be people that do something about the injustices that we see in the world. And when we make that shift and we allow our prayers and our words to turn into action, then we become more like the person that we're praying to. We put hands and feet to those prayers. We take action on the things that tug at our hearts. And that's how we become more like Jesus himself. The things that make you feel sad and angry, the things that you know are not right, the injustices that you feel in your heart, can they motivate you to act? Those things that hurt you and hurt the people that you care about, those things that are wrong, that we know that God wants them made right, are you going to take action? Because God created you and I to be the somebodies that do something about it. Not just to talk about it, but to be about the work, to act on it, to keep acting on it. It is a reflection of our faith in God, because our God cares about injustice. And then others around us see that we take action, and then they can join the efforts. And that's how we make a tangible difference. And I get it. It may feel overwhelming. It might feel like, well, I'm just one person. Like, what difference does that make? But this is why this is an act of faith. I'm having faith that my actions and your actions and the actions of others that slowly, all together, they slowly make a meaningful impact. And that's how change happens. So I have to have faith that the efforts I make do matter, even if I don't see evidence of that right away. God tells us in his word that no matter how long the fight is, no matter how hard the battle is, we can't give up. The Apostle Paul says this in Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. He says, let us not become weary in doing good. For the proper time we will reap the harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. Paul says, don't grow weary in doing good. Don't give up. Even when it gets difficult and you're tired of doing it, don't give up, because it matters. This is how God is setting the things in our worlds that have gone wrong. That's how he's setting them right. And Paul uses farming language to make his point. And while most of us aren't farmers, we know that this applies to us. He's saying, don't be weary of doing good, because there will be a harvest. But in order to have a harvest, you've got to plant the seed, you got to water it, the sun's got to shine on it. And that means that you don't plant the seed and automatically say, oh, wow, this is totally different. It takes time, and it takes consistent effort. And it's the same when we're fighting injustice. Even if you don't see any changes because of your efforts right in the moment, we've got to have faith that it takes time to see the harvest, to see the fruits of our effort. So we can't give up if we're trying to make a difference. Couple of things to keep in mind as we get ready to close. God calls us to a lifetime of action and continued action as we live out our faith. And we are not able to change everything, but we can keep doing something. And as His followers, we are called to do something. And so maybe you're wondering, like, okay, what can I do? So a couple things. First, you can use your voice. Speak up. When you see your classmates treating other people in a way that is not kind, you need to say something. And I know that when I say that, there's this big part of us that's like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, people are going to think I'm like weird or not cool. It might cost you something. It might. But this is how we have to go about making the things that are wrong in the world right. We have to be willing to say something when we see it. And this also goes for our social media. If you have an Instagram account or any form of social media, posting about it lets other people know that you care about it. It lets them know where you stand. It lets them know that these things are important to you. And so use your voice. The other thing I would encourage you to do is use your influence. And if you're like, influence? I am not an influencer. Like, I'm like a 7th grader. Like, who would I influence? You have influence over the people that are closest to you. Your family, your friends, your small groups. That means the things that you think, the things that you say, they have an impact on those that you're around. And you might not think that they do. Trust me, the things you say impact the people in your life. And so use your influence to share with the people around you these things that you care about. You know, the things that you're thinking, the things that you're noticing that are not right in the world, so the things that tug on your heart, share that with the people that are closest to you. Last, the other thing that I would encourage you to do is to use your time. So we're all busy, right? But are we spending any of our time doing things for people that are experiencing injustice? So like we say, well, I care about people that are living in poverty, but are we using any of our time to show that we care about them? And so you can use some of your time to volunteer, to serve, to work on a service project, to donate things. That shows that you are making an effort to do something. My prayer for each and every one of you is that your eyes will remain open to the injustices in the world, and that when you see them, that your heart is pulled to take action, and that you would follow Jesus by participating in making things right in the world, just like He would.